The morning Marcus Thompson woke up on what would become the most important day of his life since his wife's passing. The world outside his window was painted in the muted colors of late autumn. Dead leaves skittered across his driveway, and the November sky hung low and heavy with the promise of snow. At 48, Marcus had grown accustomed to these quiet mornings, though had never learned to love them, not since Sarah. Standing in his kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, he stared at the calendar on his wall, the one Sarah had always kept meticulously updated with birthdays, anniversaries, and doctor's appointments. Now it hung blank, except for one circled date. Rebecca, Sunday dinner, his daughter's weekly attempt to make sure he had, as yet, completely withdrawn from the world. The house around him felt too big, too empty. Every room held memories that both comforted and haunted him. Sarah's reading glasses still perched on her nightstand, her gardening gloves draped over a hook in the mudroom, her favorite teacup in the kitchen. Cabinet 6 months had passed since cancer had taken her, but Marcus still couldn't bring himself to move any of her things. His phone buzzed a text from Rebecca. "Don't forget about Cedar Grove today. Dad promised me you'll go." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Had been putting this off for weeks, making excuses about being too busy at the construction site where he worked as a foreman, but Rebecca was persistent, just like her mother had been. "You need someone to take care of Shed," said during their last Sunday dinner, pushing her pot roast around her plate. "The house is too quiet. Mom wouldn't want you to be alone like this." "I'm fine," he protested. But they both knew it wasn't true. The dark circles under his eyes and the weight had lost told a different story. "Just go look," Becca had pleaded. "Cedar Grove is a good shelter. My friend Jenny works there. If nothing else, maybe you can make a donation." Now standing in his kitchen with his cold coffee, Marcus couldn't come up with any more excuses. He grabbed his worn leather jacket, the one Sarah had given him for their 20th anniversary, and his truck keys. Cedar Grove Animal Shelter sat on the outskirts of town, a modest, single-story building with peeling blue paint and a gravel parking lot bordered by maple trees. The sign out front had seen better days, its letters faded by sun and weather. As Marcus pulled up in his Ford pickup, he noticed only a few other cars in the lot. An old Volkswagen Beetle, probably belonging to staff, and a minivan with a foster mom bumper sticker. The gravel crunched beneath his work boots as he made his way to the entrance, each step feeling like it was taking him further from his comfort zone. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the first few snowflakes of the season. Marcus remembered how Sarah had loved the first snow, how she had always insisted on taking a walk together when it started, no matter the time of day. A soft bell chimed as he pushed open the door, and immediately warm air, carrying the distinct smell of animals and cleaning supplies, enveloped him. The reception area was small but clean, with bulletin boards covered in photos of adopted pets and their happy families. A collection of donated blankets and towels sat in one corner, and a donation jar for medical expenses stood on the counter. Behind the desk, a young woman with clay red hair and kind eyes looked up from her computer. Her name tag read Jenny, and Marcus recognized her from some of the photos Rebecca had shown him on her phone. "Welcome to Cedar Grove." Jenny's smile was genuine and warm. "How can I help you today?" Marcus cleared his throat, suddenly feeling out of place in his work boots and old jeans. "I'm Rebecca Thompson's father," he said, as if that explained everything. Recognition lit up Jenny's face. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, Rebecca mentioned you might be coming by. She speaks about you all the time during our lunch break." She stood up, smoothing down her shelter-branded polo shirt. "Are you interested in meeting some of our residents today?" "Just looking," Marcus said, quickly shoving his hands in his pockets. "Rebecca thinks I need—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. Jenny's expression softened with understanding. "Rebecca mentioned about your wife. I'm so sorry for your loss." She came around the desk. "Would you like to see our dogs or cats?" "First dogs," Marcus replied, surprising himself. Sarah had always been a cat person. They had 3 during their marriage, each one spoiled rotten, but something pulled him toward the dog section today. Jenny led him through a door marked K9 area, and immediately the sounds and smells intensified. Dogs of various sizes and colors occupied kennels along both sides of a long corridor, some barking excitedly at their presence, others watching with quiet interest. The concrete floors were clean, and each kennel had beds, toys, and fresh water. "We currently have about 20 dogs," Jenny explained as they walked past, all different personalities and backgrounds. "Some are strays. Others were given up by owners," she said, pausing, her expression darkening. "Others came from less fortunate situations," she added. Marcus nodded, trying to take it all in. Each kennel had a card attached to it that included the dog's name, age, and a brief history. Max, 3 years old, loves tennis balls, read one. Luna, 5 years old, good with kids, said another. They were halfway down the corridor when Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. Jenny continued a few steps before realizing he wasn't following. In the kennel to his right sat a blue-gray pit bull pressed into the corner, as if trying to make himself as small as possible. The dog's head was lowered, but what caught Marcus' attention wasn't his posture, it was the sound. Above the general barking and whining of the other dogs, he could hear a distinct crying sound, almost human in its grief. "That's Blue," Jenny said softly. Walking back to join Marcus, "He's good. He's our longest resident." How long? Marcus found himself asking, unable to tear his gaze from the dog. "Almost 2 years now." Jenny's voice reflected a tinge of sadness. "He came to us after being rescued from a fighting ring. He was used as a bait dog." Marcus felt his stomach twist. Had heard about bait dogs, the ones used to test fighting dogs' aggression, unable to defend themselves, often with their mouths taped shut. Now he noticed the scars that crossed Blue's face and body, the mangled left ear, and the sunken IL where his left eye should have been. "People have a lot of misconceptions about pit bulls," Jenny continued, "to add in his scars and his missing eye, and most people just pass him by. But he's the gentlest soul you'll ever meet. He's never shown an ounce of aggression, not even when he first came to us barely alive." Blue had raised his head slightly, and Marcus found himself caught in the gaze of his remaining eye, a warm honey brown that seemed to hold world of sadness and wisdom. Something in that gaze struck Marcus like a physical blow. He saw pain there, yes, but also a profound gentleness, and something else, something he recognized from his own reflection. "Every morning, loneliness. He cries like this every day," Jenny said quietly. "Has since he arrived. We've had behaviorists look at him, tried different medications, but nothing seems to help. It's like he's grieving something we can't understand." Marcus' throat fell tight. "Can I?" His voice cracked, and he had to clear his throat before continuing. "Can I go?" And Jenny looked surprised. "But please, of course, just let me get you." She retrieved a visitor badge and clipboard with some basic safety information, which Marcus signed without really reading. Then she carefully opened the kennel door. "Move slowly," she advised. "Blue can be nervous with new people, but he's never shown any aggression. It'll give you some time alone with him." The concrete floor was cold and hard as Marcus lowered himself to sit cross-legged in the center of the kennel. Jenny closed the door behind him, and suddenly it was just him and Blue, with the sounds of the other dogs seeming far away. "Hey there, buddy," Marcus said softly, his voice rough with emotion. "Looks like we've both seen better days." Blue's crying head quieted to a soft whimper as one eye fixed intently on Marcus. "I lost my wife." Marcus found himself saying the words coming easier here in the simple concrete room than they had in months of grief counseling. "Sarah, cancer took her 6 months ago. We were married 26 years. He smiled sadly, remembering. "She would have loved you. You know, she always had a soft spot for the underdogs. Used to bring home every stray cat in the neighborhood," as if understanding. Blue shifted slightly, uncall, just a fraction from his tight ball. "I don't know what I'm doing here," Marcus continued, more to himself than the dog. "My daughter thinks I need company." But he trailed off as Blue suddenly moved. The pit bull took a tentative step forward. Then another. Marcus held perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Blue approached slowly until he was standing right in front of Marcus. Then, with deliberate gentleness, he lowered his head and pressed it against Marcus' chest. Something broke inside Marcus Thompson at that moment. Something that had been frozen since the day Sarah died. He hadn't cried when the doctors had given them her prognosis. He hadn't cried during the endless rounds of chemotherapy. He hadn't cried at the funeral. Not even when Rebecca had broken down in his arms. But now, sitting on the cold concrete floor of a shelter kennel with a broken dog offering him comfort, Marcus began to sob. Blue pressed closer, and Marcus wrapped his arms around the dog's sturdy frame. They sat like that for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, sharing their grief and loneliness. Blue's scarred body was warm against Marcus, his chest, his presence solid and real in a way nothing had felt since Sarah's passing. When Jenny came to check on them, she found them still embraced, though Marcus' tears had subsided. Blue's tail was wagging properly now, thumping against the concrete floor. "I think," Marcus said, his voice rough, "I'd like to know more about adopting him." The adoption process wasn't simple or quick, but Marcus threw himself into it with an energy he hadn't felt in months. There were home visits to arrange, paperwork to fill out, and preparations to make. He spent hours researching pit bulls and dogs with trauma backgrounds, ordering books about positive reinforcement training, and watching hundreds of videos about how to help rescue dogs adjust to new homes. Rebecca was overjoyed when he told her about Blue and came right over to help him get the house ready, bringing with her baby gates, dog beds, and toys Shed purchased the moment Shed heard the news. "Jenny told me how you connected with him," she said as they set up a quiet corner in the living room with a plush bed and soft blankets. She said Shed never seen anything like it. Marcus just nodded, focusing on securing the baby gate. He wasn't ready to talk about that moment in the kennel, about how a dog's simple act of comfort had broken through 6 months of frozen grief. He took 2 weeks off from his construction job to help Blue settle in something that surprised his crew. He hadn't taken a single day off since Sarah's funeral. His foreman Mike, who worked with him for 15 years, just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "About time, Thompson, about time." The day he brought Blue home was overcast but warm for November. The pit bull trembled in the back seat of the truck the whole ride, but his tail gave a tentative wag when they pulled into the driveway of Marcus' modest ranch house. "Welcome home, buddy," Marcus said softly as he helped Blue out of the truck. The first few weeks were tough. Blue was afraid of quick movements and loud noises. He wouldn't go through doorways unless Marcus went first, and he spent a lot of time in his quiet corner, watching the world with his one eye. But there were good moments, too. Blue's tail would wag every time Marcus entered the room, and he followed his new owner everywhere when he felt secure enough to leave his corner. The first big breakthrough came one night, about a month after the adoption. Marcus had dozed off on the couch watching TV, something he had done a lot since Sarah's passing. He woke to find Blue standing next to him, whimpering softly, not the scared whimper from the shelter, but something different. When Marcus sat up, Blue gently took his sleeve between his teeth and tugged. Curious, Marcus followed as Blue led him to the master bedroom. He hadn't slept there since Sarah died, choosing instead to use the guest room or couch. Blue walked to Sarah's side of the bed and pawed at the comforter, then looked at Marcus expectantly. "I don't know, boy," Marcus whispered, his heart pounding. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." Blue whimpered again and laid his head on the bed, his one eye full of understanding and encouragement. With shaking hands, Marcus pulled the covers back and sat on the edge of the bed. It still faintly smelled of Sarah's perfume. Blue immediately jumped up and curled himself around Marcus, pressing close just as he had the first day at the shelter. That night, Marcus slept in his bed for the first time in 6 months, with Blue's warm presence beside him, keeping the loneliness at bay. As winter turned to spring, both men and dog began to heal. Blue's confidence grew, and his personality emerged, goofy and loving, with a particular fondness for squeaky toys and belly rubs. His scarred face would break into a wide pit bull smile whenever Marcus came home from work, and his whole body would wiggle with joy. Marcus found himself laughing again, something he hadn't thought possible. He started taking Blue for walks in the local park, where the pit bull's gentle nature and sweet demeanor helped change many people's preconceptions about his breed. Children would ask to pet him, and Blue would sit PTIL, gently licking their hands and wagging his tail. One day, a little girl with braids pointed at Blue's missing eye. She asked what happened to him. Marcus knelt down beside Blue, who leaned against him supportively. "Blue had some hard times before he came to live with me," he explained gently, "but he's very brave, and he doesn't let it stop him from being happy now." The girl nodded seriously and then kissed Blue's scarred head. "You're a good dog," she declared, and Blue's tail wagged so hard his whole body shook. Rebecca noticed a change in her father, too. "You seem lighter, Dad," she said during one of their Sunday dinners, watching as Blue carefully took treats from her hand. "More like your old self," Marcus smiled, reaching down to scratch Blue's ears. "He's good medicine," but it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still bad days when the grief felt overwhelming. When Marcus would sit in Sarah's garden and cry on those days, Blue never left his side, offering silent comfort and occasional face licks until the worst of the pain passed. And Blue had his bad days too. Sometimes a car backfiring or a stranger moving too quickly would trigger his fears, and he'd retreat to his quiet corner, shaking. On those days, Marcus would sit on the floor beside him, reading aloud from whatever book he was currently enjoying, letting Blue know he wasn't alone. The first year brought many milestones. Blue learned to play with toys, something he'd never done before. He discovered the sheer joy of swimming when Marcus took him to the lake where he and Sarah used to picnic. He even made friends with the neighbor's golden retriever, although it took months of careful introduction through the fence. Marcus kept a diary of their progress, something his grief counselor had suggested a long time ago, but he never managed to do. Now he found himself writing daily, documenting Blue's achievements and his own healing process. Today, Blue walked past the construction site without flinching at the noise. Head right, or looked at Sarah's photo album. Today it hurt less than before. 1 year later after the adoption, Marcus took Blue back to the Cedar Grove shelter, not to return him. Far from it. They were there as volunteers, working with other traumatized dogs, showing them that trust and love were possible. Jenny, still working at the shelter, would often watch them with tears in her eyes as Blue gently approached the scared dogs, showing them through his own example that healing was possible. Their story began to spread throughout the community. It started small, just local pet owners at the park sharing the tale of the one-eyed pit bull who helped his owner through grief. But then the local newspaper did a feature on them, complete with before and after photos of Blue, and suddenly, their story was everywhere. Social media picked up the story, and soon Marcus was receiving messages from people all over the country touched by their journey. Some were grieving spouses who found hope in their story. Others were people who had previously been afraid of pit bulls until they read about Blue's gentle soul and capacity for love. Each message touched Marcus deeply, though he still felt uncomfortable with the attention. The shelter asked if they would consider becoming official ambassadors for their adoption program. Marcus was hesitant. At first, had never been one for public speaking, but Blue's calm presence gave him courage. They began visiting schools and community centers, educating people about animal rescue, responsible pet ownership, and the truth about pit bulls. During one such visit to an elementary school, a quiet boy stayed behind after the presentation. He had a visible scar on his face from what Marcus later learned was a car accident. "Does Blue ever feel different?" the boy asked softly, touching his own scar because of how he looks. Marcus watched as Blue gently approached the boy, offering his scarred face for pets. "Blue knows that scars are just proof that we survived something difficult," he said. "They don't define who we are." The boy wrapped his arms around Blue, and the pit bull leaned into the embrace, his tail wagging steadily. That evening, Marcus added another entry to his journal. Today, Blue helped the young boy see that being different doesn't mean being less. As their second year together unfolded, Marcus and Blue's impact on, as the community grew, they incepted a support group at the local community center for those mourning the loss of spouses. With Blue serving as an unofficial therapy dog, his intuitive ability to detect emotional pain and offer comfort helped countless others begin their own healing journeys. One such success story was that of Eleanor, a 72-year-old widow who had not left her house for many months since the loss of her husband of 50 years. Upon joining the support group, she barely spoke, but Blue would always lay his head in her lap during first-at meetings. She slowly began to become more forthcoming, and soon she too began to volunteer at the shelter. "That dog," she told Marcus one day, as she watched Blue play with a newly rescued puppy, "he has an old soul. He knows things we don't." The shelter began to see a surge in pit bull adoptions, especially among older adults living alone. People who had never considered getting the breed before were now giving these dogs a chance. Inspired by Blue's story of healing and hope, Rebecca, observing the impact her father and Blue were having, started a social media campaign called Second Chances that featured success stories from the shelter. Blue's before and after photos became the face of the campaign. His transformation from the crying shelter dog to the confident, joy-filled companion touching hearts across the country. 3 years after Blue came home with Marcus, they received an invitation to speak at a national conference on animal welfare. Marcus stood on the stage, Blue calmly sitting beside him, and shared their story with hundreds of shelter workers and animal advocates. "Blue taught me that healing isn't about forgetting," he told the audience. "It's about learning how to carry our past with grace and still be able to love every morning he wakes up and chooses joy despite everything he has been through. He taught me that I could do the same." Life had settled into a new normal. Marcus still missed Sarah every day, but the sharp pain had softened into something more manageable. Blue's presence had helped him turn their house from a museum of grief back into home again. Sarah's things were still there, but now they brought comfort instead of pain. They developed little rituals. Every morning they would walk through Sarah's garden, Blue carefully avoiding the flower beds she had so lovingly tended. Marcus would talk to her sometimes, telling her about their day, about Blue's latest adventures, about how much he still missed her. Blue would listen attentively, occasionally offering a sympathetic whine or a gentle nuzzle. "You were right, honey," Marcus would say, looking at the sunrise. "There's always room for more love in our hearts." The crying that had characterized Blue's shelter stay never returned. Instead, he developed a happy grumble that Marcus called his song, a sound somewhere between a purr and a laugh that he made when he was particularly content. He saved this special sound for quiet evenings when they sat together on the porch, watching the world go by. As Blue's muzzle started to show signs of gray, Marcus realized their time together wouldn't last forever. But rather than let this thought bring him down, he celebrated each day they had. They took more trips to the lake, spent longer hours in the garden, and Blue got extra treats. Just because their story continued to inspire others, the shelter created the Blues Fund to help cover medical expenses were harder to adopt dogs, and started a program specifically focused on matching senior citizens with older shelter pets. Marcus served on the advisory board with Blue, attending every meeting naturally 5 years after that fateful November day when Marcus first walked in a cedar grove. Shelter, he stood in his garden watching Blue snooze in a patch of sunlight. The pit bull's face was more white rather than blue-gray now. Still, his eyes retained that same gentle wisdom that had so captured Marcus' heart years ago. Rebecca, married now and expecting a baby, would often tell him that Blue had saved his life. But Marcus knew it went farther than that. Blue didn't just save him. He taught him how to live again, to find purpose in the pain, and to transform grief into something beautiful. Every night, as they settled in a bed, Blue always on Sarah's side, Marcus thought about the mysterious ways life worked. Sometimes, the most profound healing comes from the most unexpected sources. How love can wear many faces, even one with scars and a missing eye. "Good night, buddy," he would whisper, and Blue would respond with his special grumble song. His solid warmth reassured him that even in life's darkest moments, there is always hope for a new beginning. And somewhere, Marcus was sure, Sarah was smiling at them both.